Well, now on to Chapter 2, Frequency Distributions. So, Harnell females were asked the age that their mother first had a child. And so here is a frequency distribution of the ages and then how many people or how many women were in this particular age group. So from 14 to 18, there were 6 women who had their first child when they were 14 to 18, etc. And then in the oldest age group, it goes from 34 to 38. There were 2 women. Then find the relative frequency. So that's part A. So to find the relative frequency, we basically just need to add up these numbers right here, which is going to be 28. And then this one is going to be 2 out of 28, 3 out of 28, 5 out of 28, etc. And then the last thing to do is just divide them and put it in decimal form. So here we go. These are the relative frequencies. So in other words, in this oldest age group right here, then it's about 7.1% of the women were in the oldest age group. Okay, on to the next part. So if you look back at these ages, these are called the classes. This is the youngest class. This is the oldest class at the top. So what are the class limits? And what's the lower class limit? So what's the lowest age you could be to get into this bottom category down here? So that would be 14 years old for this one, 19 years old for this one, etc. So those are called the lower class limits. Well, on the other side of that are the upper class limits. So you have to be 18 would be the oldest and still be in this category. 23, 28 on the other side, those are the upper class limits. Then the boundaries. So if you go from one to the next class, from one class to the next class, and we're going from 18 to 19, then what's the dividing point between those two? So between an 18 and a 19, that would be 18.5. And then the next one going from going from 23 to the next one, 24, the dividing is going to be 23.5. So find the class boundaries, and that's going to be those decimals. Now, so I started with 18.5 and then 23.5, etc. When you get to the end, this one would have between 33 and 34 would be 33.5. But then, for reasons you'll see when we go to do the graphs, you need a boundary on this side. So then this one on the right of 38 would be 38.5. Likewise, you need one on the left of 14. So that's the reason for the 13.5. Next, very easy, find the class width. Well, one way to do it when it's ages like this is you could count from 14 years old to 18 years old. 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. That covers 5 ages. But a much easier way to do it is just take 2 of these, like 34 and 29, or take 2 of these, 19 and 14, subtract them, and you get that the width is 5. So now we get to make a frequency table all on our own. So here is the data. No big story or anything to go along with it, just here's some numbers that I made up. So you start by finding what's called the range. And the range is the biggest score minus the smallest. So the biggest is 15 and the smallest is 1. So it's a range of 14. Now, since there's supposed to be 4 classes, you take the 14 and divide by 4. And if you get a decimal, even if it was 3.01, I would suggest you round up to the next the next whole number. So when I divided, I got a 3.5. I'm going to round it up to 4. That is the class width. Okay, so now to make the table. So you start with the very smallest score and you put that at the bottom. The smallest was a 1. Then you take the class width and you add it to that. that's going to give you the start of the next class. And then you do that again. You get to 9. You do that again. You get to 13. So you just add 4, our class width, each time. Okay, now we need to fill in the rest. Well, this one has to go from 1 to what? Well, if the next one starts at 5, then this one would have to go to 4. And then this one would have to go to 8, etc. And since this side, the left side, went up by 4, this is going up by 4 also. The next one would be 12, and then the next one would be 16. Now, there are some occasions when this number isn't quite big enough. So then let's say there happens to be a 17 in the list, then that's okay to just make this a 17. That didn't happen in this case. So you fill all of those in, and then the next thing is you just go and count. You just go look through the list, how many numbers are 1, 2, 3, or 4. There was 9 of them. So that is a frequency table. Good times. On to the next idea. When you make a graph out of that, which is, we're going to do one example of it here, then the next section has more graphing. But anyway, if you make a bar graph, there are, please hold the applause for my artwork. I know you want to just stand up and cheer that. But anyway, yes, I did draw this by hand. Anyway, if all of the bars are about the same, then that's uniform. When it looks like this, it starts off small, it's biggest in the middle, and then it's symmetric, then that's normal. And then skewed is when it goes up fast and then comes down slower. This is actually called skewed to the right. These are off to the right are smaller. So then the last thing to do is make our own graph and try and see, does it look normal, skewed, uniform, what? So here's some information about men's heights. And, whoops, and we're going to make a bar graph. As you can see, I actually did it over here. So what I did is I took, since this is a range of 60 to 64, I didn't want to put that on the graph 60 over to 64, and then the next one starts at 65, but then the bars are supposed to touch, so then this number right here is going to be the 64.5, which is the class boundary, and I didn't want to put 64.5 right here and have it look all messy like that. I wanted it nice and neat and beautiful like mine. So what I did instead is I took what's called the class mark. It's the middle number. So you just average a 60 and a 64, add them up and divide by 2, and you'll get the middle number 62. So that's what I use. And then I just put it in the middle of the bar. And then the middle of 65 to 69 would be the 67, etc. And you just do that for each class. And then this is starting, the vertical scale is starting at 0. Then I just counted by 20s, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And then I put little slash marks for this would be 10, then 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And then this is a 10. And you can also sometimes, what people will do is they'll write on the top of the box, this is going up to 10, this is going up to 22, etc. You don't have to do that part, but sometimes people like to do it. And that concludes the section.